Why, hello there. I didn't see you come in. Let me tell you a story. So, once there was this party, in Canada who was up in the polls by about 20%. They were nearing 50% of the popular vote. They were blowing out all opposition, and their main two opposition parties were virtually tied in the polling, 20 to 19. That meant that they were getting 240 seats, which this is a pretty big number. Nearly 75% of the total seats in the country they're running in. Now, they were considered guaranteed to win the next election. Um, there was considered by polling aggregators a zero chance that they would even get a minority, a plurality of the seats. They were guaranteed to get a majority of the seats. But what happened is they blundered that, and they went from 238 seats now down to 123. How did they do that? God only knows. Now, I will say this is not. I'm not gonna listen to 338 here. In fact, this is my own prediction. I filled out the seats I believe to be safe, and anyone who says, "Oh, this is over," I mean, it's not looking good for the conservatives. But I have 126 toss-ups. Like, it can at least be a liberal minority. Even there's a possibility of a conservative plurality. I'd say the odds as of now stand at like 15% of conservative plurality, 30% of liberal plurality, and around 50 to 55% of liberal majority. Um, I also have two aggregators to help me with this arduous task of clicking color onto map. We have Polywave, which is it's a new forecast actually. This one um actually is a liberal minority. LPC at 170, CPC at 136, with a relatively strong block and NDP. Um Compared to 338, which has the block at 22, this one has them at 25. At 9 for 338, this one has them at 10. And it definitely has the conservatives a lot better than 338. Though, this is a simple margin of error away from this, vice versa. Um, and still, you do have a liberal plus 2 popular vote. We have seen some polls narrow, which is why I'd say, on average, I'd expect this to be somewhat close to the result. I still think liberals are narrowly favored to get a majority. We'll have to see how the prediction ends up going. Um, I'll go seat by seat. I do think probably ends up better than 188 liberal, or the liberals are below that, conservatives are above that. But I will go seat by seat and give my thoughts on each one. So we start off here. I'll do the territories first. Yukon, I think could be potentially close. Yukon definitely is isolated from the rest of Canadian trends. You could honestly see a pretty big NDP performance here, which wouldn't matter. The NDP isn't winning either one of these seats; they haven't for a while. But we'll get to one soon. But I think the Conservatives definitely are within striking distance here. Polywave does have Conservatives up. I don't think that they'll win Yukon. Um, it is a Liberal seat. It's been a Liberal seat for a while, but Conservatives are doing better. With natives, which actually don't make up that much of Yukon. And at least I think conservatives have a pretty good candidate in Yukon. That's what I've heard. So I think they can make it somewhat close, but I'd still say it's a likely margin. By the way, these are the same margins. As my regular predictions, 1, 5, 10 margins. It's a bit harder since it's not a two-party system in Canada. So it's 1, 5, 10 over the candidate below them, and if it's like competitive, who will get second? I'll mention it. When we move over to here, which 338 Canada doesn't really show it. 338 Canada's tried to like include the local candidate bonus for a lot of these seats. But Conservatives really didn't nominate a good candidate here, and the NDP incumbent does have a chance of holding on. I still would say he's not favored. Um, I'd say it's a bit of a low likely margin over there. Um, we have Cochin, Malahat, Langford. This also has an NDP incumbent. The NDP has fallen off a lot, though. Um, I don't think it'll be like this close between the NDP and the Liberals, but I do think the Liberals are being underestimated here. 338 Canada recently, like manually changed it so that the NDP would do better. So I'd say based on that split, it probably ends up like CPC plus 7 or so, CPC plus 8. I actually think it votes to the right of this riding. Um, we have the 901 Ladysmith, could be close between the CPC and the Greens. The Liberals and NDP have kind of fallen out of contention for this seat. But at the end of the day, they won it in 2019, but they even placed second in 2021, especially with the Liberals taking a lot of votes from the Greens and the NDP. Like people talk about the NDP, they really don't talk about the Greens taking a lot of votes. I'd say it probably ends up conservative, probably by a little bit over the Greens. So now we move on to Esquimal Sanich Suk. I don't know how to pronounce that. But this is a close race. I still think I mean, I'm pretty sure the two forecasts differ when it comes to this one. If I'm not mistaken, yeah, it's considered liberal in this forecast. Um, it was an NDP seat for a while. It depends where the NDP voters go. I think conservatives are improving enough in the Victoria area and like the non-Vancouver areas of British Columbia. I think a lot of the liberal surge is concentrated to here, and I think they're able to win it. But like by 3 to 4. And then here we have Saanich Gulf Islands. This is considered pretty close down the wire. Elizabeth May, the co-leader of the Greens, is the incumbent MP here. I do think she's being significantly underestimated. Like most leaders, I'm going to apply the leaders a bonus with the polling. So I think she probably comes out with like an 8% win. Though I could definitely see it flipping conservative or even liberal in a potentially bad night for the Greens. Even Wave has it as pretty heavily for the Green Party. I think they're overestimating her a tad bit there, but it's close enough. Here, we have a few seats in British Columbia. Um, Vancouver East, I do think the NDP is being slightly underestimated. I think a lot of I think their support's being rallied to the Liberals way too fast. Um, I think at the end of the day, especially in seats like this, they'll get a bit more support. So I think they end up winning that by a likely margin. Vancouver Kingsway, they recently took the lead here after it was considered pretty gone for the NDP and ready to go Liberals. I do think that the Liberals will surge a lot here. It's Vancouver, which is kind of where the Liberals are surging, but I think just based on incumbency, the NDP will narrowly prevail here by like 2 to 3%. New Westminster, Burnaby, um, it's close. I don't think the Conservatives have too much of a chance here, but it's a pretty big. It's been a pretty big win for the NDP. I don't see that 25% change reversing itself just yet. Actually, yeah, Pulley Wave also has it going to the NDP. I'd say it's very narrow, but I still do think the NDP holds. Out of Burnaby Central, this is Jagmeet Singh's riding. I still think he loses. I'm going to apply a little bit of a bonus to him. I don't think it's like this where he is 11.6% away from winning. I definitely think he can win, but I think as of now, he's probably going to lose by like 3 to 4 points to the Liberals. Though I do think he places above the conservative James Yan. Though I wouldn't be surprised to see him get third in his own seat. Now we have Richmond Center, Marpole. You have a Liberal incumbent. This one's been pretty close for a while. Um, I know Pulley Wave is much more bullish on the conservative chances here. I just think that they're doing okay in British Columbia. But you'll have a slight incumbency bonus, which tips it towards the Liberals by like a pretty narrow margin. And it's kind of the same in Richmond East, except it's even less for the Conservatives here. Pulley Wave has it going to Liberals. I don't think there's that much of a ticket split between these two, and I think they win it by like 2 to 3 points. Delta probably at the end of the day ends up going Liberal, but not by too much, likely margin. Then we have Surrey, or we'll go to Port Moody. I am butchering these pronunciations, but it's actually going conservative in a pulley wave. I don't know how much I believe that, but I definitely think there's a chance it goes conservative. It would be important for any conservative coalition. They did place second in 2019, or they placed first in 2019, but behind the NDP in 2021. I definitely think they're within striking distance, but I think Liberals are probably narrowly favored um, to take the riding as of now. Um, we get to Surrey, the Surrey area. I have these two seats reasonably competitive. Actually, Surrey Newton should be safe. My bad, but I definitely think these two will be close. Surrey, the CPC overperformed a lot, or the Conservative Party in British Columbia overperformed a lot in the 2024 provincial election year. I think the same thing happens here. Surrey Centre, I honestly think there's a good chance that they can pull this one off. They haven't been doing that well recently, though, so I think it'll probably narrowly stay liberal. Um, Here in Fleetwood, it's kind of the same thing, except it's a much more uphill battle, likely, in my opinion. We have South Surrey White Rock. I just think because they're overperforming in Surrey, they'll probably end up holding this. And I'm going to be a bit bold and say it's a likely margin that they hold it by. Then we also have Cloverdale Langley City. Tamara Jansen won a by-election in late 2024 to hold the seat. She won it by 50. That's that's why you see this jump in the aggregate way back then. But it's been reasonably close since then. It's a very swingy riding, but I think just because she won that by-election by so much, um, so recently, I, I have a hard time saying she'll lose. Same thing with Polly Wave, which actually used to be very bullish on the Liberal Party's chances there. I think she narrowly holds on by the skin of her teeth. I really can't say the same for Langley Township, Fraser Heights. Um, I actually have John Aldag, who is the old MP um, for Cloverdale Langley City. He resigned to run for uh, provincial parliament, a seat that he ended up losing. Don't ask me why he thought running for provincial parliament, not even as the member of the same party, he ran as a member of the NDP because there's no liberals in provincial parliament. But don't ask me why he thought that was a good strategy, but he lost, and now he's running for Langley Township, Fraser Heights. I think that the CPC is going to have a little bit worse luck here. By an equally narrow margin, I think that they end up losing it. Then we also have Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge. This one's a very close riding. You have an incumbent conservative. I mean, I'd be inclined to give him the edge. Plus, Pulley Wave has it going conservative. I'd say he wins by like two, maybe one on a bad night. And then the reason I have independent as an option, we have Abbotsburg South Langley. Now, they don't factor this in, but what happened is the incumbent member, I think his name is Ed Fast, if I'm not mistaken. But he was virtually cooed out by the Conservatives on his chosen successor. Any of his chosen successor candidates were banned from the ballot in the nomination. So they nominated Sukhman Singh Gill, but the member of provincial parliament for this district, who's a rather big name, um, and he also ran in the conservative primary, decided to run as an independent here. Now, there's a good chance that he splits the vote. I still think it's going to be a pretty hard win for the Liberals, even Pulley Wave has it as pretty solidly for the. Why do I hear so many fucking dogs barking? But they have it as pretty solidly for the Conservatives. But you've had recent polls. One of them showed the Independent tied with the Conservatives, and we actually had one. Come out very recently that had the independent head of the Conservatives. I think it's going to be narrow, and I disagree with people like Token Canadian who think that Conservatives are out of this. I think they could potentially hold on to it, but I think as of now, it's slated to go to the independent by about 2 to 3%. Now we have this area of British Columbia, quite yellow on the provincial parliament level, but with the NDP falling off, like this is an NDP seat. You don't actually have the incumbent NDP member running for re-election, but like this seat, which Conservatives are going to win by 20 over the Liberals, has an incumbent NDP member representing it. Just remember that. But you have these three seats, which are relatively close. Um, all, if I'm not mistaken, have conservative incumbents. Yeah, Tracy Gray, she's locked in a pretty brutal re-election battle. Pulley Wave has her ahead, though. That's kind of what Pulley Wave does. I think because she's an incumbent, I'll give her the tiniest edge. But that's definitely within reach for liberals. Yeah, Vernon Lake Country, Monashi, probably not that competitive. 8 point margin of victory on 338 Canada. Okanagan Lake West, not considered that competitive on a Poly Wave. Considered somewhat competitive on 338 Canada. It still really hasn't narrowed to the point where I would say that conservatives are in danger of losing it, especially considering I do think most of the liberal surge in British Columbia um, is from Vancouver area, especially inner city Vancouver. I'm going to say it's likely. I'm actually going to move this to lean because of that fact as well. Now we move on to Alberta, where liberals are slated to make exclusively gains. I do think that they'll outperform the polls here because the polls factor in like liberals have gone up to 30% in Alberta, so it factors in like, oh, Fort McMurray, they've done better, just a completely uh like a deafeningly rural riding. Like no, um, I'm not going to go from 7 to 16% here. Like, okay, you get 6% from the NDP. You're not getting like 5% from the PPC. So I think that most of that comes from Edmonton and Calgary, which doesn't bode well for the Conservatives. So we have here in Edmonton, Strathcona. I do think underestimating the Liberals is actually going to hurt the NDP here. Is one of the only ridings where I'll say that the NDP does worse than they're projected to, because I do think that they, at the end of the day, get a lot of voters to come home, or a few voters to come home to them. Not anything to like sway the balance of the election, but I do think that the Liberals end up taking from them here. Um, and they only win that with a likely margin, though it'd be like 40 to 31 or 40 to 32, something like that. Edmonton Center, this is safe liberal. I just think that you're going to get blown out of the water. This, I think, has an incumbent conservative MP. Yeah, it was very narrow in 2021 and 2019, but still, I do think it flips, and it flips quite easily. Um, Edmonton, Griesbach. I think the NDP and the Liberals are going to end up hurting each other here, and I think because of that, Conservatives are narrowly favored to hold on to the seat, but by like 2%. Uh, Seats like Edmonton Southeast, I think is probably likely Liberal. Liberals outperforming their polling numbers, no incumbent. Not a great scenario for Conservatives. Edmonton Gateway, I think probably goes to Liberals by 2 to 3%. Um, I think you have Edmonton Riverbend, also probably narrowly goes Liberal. Um, Edmonton West. I'm gonna have this go liberal by a narrow margin as well. Edmonton Northwest. Actually, what we'll do is we'll have this one end up narrowly going conservative, and this one narrowly go liberal. No incumbent here, incumbent here. Um, then Edmonton Manning. It's gonna be close. The NDP did have a significant share of the vote here. Um, but I think it narrowly ends up going conservative. Now, Calgary does have, I'd say, on the balance, less competitive riding, especially since a lot of South Calgary is still safe conservative. Calgary, Nose Hill. Once again, I do think that the liberal surge is concentrated in seats like this. I still think it ends up safe conservative because I don't see them going down from 55% to 50% that easily, but it's a potential riding to watch as somewhat competitive. McKnight is safe. Skyview and Confederation probably both end up, or I'll put Confederation as lean, Skyview as likely. Crowfoot could be competitive, but I think Liberals are slightly outside of striking distance here, especially since Conservatives won with 55% last time. It's going to be hard to win that, so well, it could be competitive depending on how the rest of the campaign goes. I'll put it as lean conservative. Here in Calgary, Signal Hill, I'm pretty sure Polywave is more bullish. Yeah, Polywave is more bullish on liberals here. I still think it ends up likely, but a rather high likely margin. At least Polywave is bullish on their chances there, unlike Calgary Nose Hill, which neither one is really confident in liberals getting close there. Then Calgary Center is CPC plus 1.9 there, and a virtual tie. In 338 Canada. I think once again the Liberals are going to outperform expectations in these cities in Alberta and rather narrowly end up winning that. I think more, that's not what I meant. I think more of their outperformance of expectations is going to be in Edmonton than Calgary, though. Now we also have Saskatchewan. I considered potentially saying that this northern riding would be would be under 10% for the Liberals. It is actually, you have a conservative incumbent here that declined to seek re-election. It was redistricted to be much more liberal friendly. Um, Conservatives have a pretty good candidate, if I'm not mistaken, and Liberals haven't run the best candidate. But at the end of the day, it's still a heavily liberal riding. And Liberals as a whole, they're more outperforming in the prairies. But Liberals are doing relatively, or outperforming in Alberta, but they're doing relatively well in the prairies at large. So I think that probably ends up safe. We have these three seats here. Saskatoon University, I think, is probably narrowly under 10 for a similar reason as Alberta. I think the Liberal surge is concentrated in the cities. Regina, you have Regina, Leuven. I think this is actually kind of competitive. Yeah, in a pulley wave. I think it's narrowly under 10. It's not what I meant to do. I think it's narrowly under 10, but not too much closer than that. And you have Regina, Wisconsin, or Wisconsin. I'm used to saying Wisconsin. Um, it, it's a potential liberal flip. I'm gonna say that they're not favored to win it, just because conservatives did get quite a bit of the vote in 2021. Even if you want to say like the NDP falls off, they're not going to lose too much. And I think the NDP is going to do decently enough to hold Liberals out of winning that seat. Now we have actually the final territory, Nunavut, relatively isolated from the rest of politics in Canada. I think the NDP could hold up somewhat well here. They have an incumbent MP here. I think Polywave has them winning it, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, not by that much. I don't think it's by that much, but I think the incumbent NDP MP wins by 2 to 3% or so. Though it's definitely a riding to watch. Churchill, Kiwadanuk, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. You once again have an incumbent NDP MP. I think it's going to be hard to knock them off, though I think it's definitely within the realm of possibility. Narrower than Nunavut, but still narrow NDP hold. Um, we also have Winnipeg Center, NDP incumbent. I think you probably see this NDP incumbent hold, though I will say Polywave does have Liberals favored there. Elmwood Transcona, really their only opposition is the Conservatives, and they're not doing too hot. I think it's definitely a potential Conservative win, but you are once again going up against an incumbent MP who nearly won with 50%. Though the Liberals could screw them over. Don't count them out of that, but I'd say it's also like a 2 to 3 point win over there. Let me X out of some of these tabs. 330 Canada, that's one problem with it. They accumulate fast. You have Liberals here taking down Rakeable Donko, an incumbent MP in Manitoba. It's, yeah, Conservative only got 42.4%. I think Liberals are narrowly favored to end up winning there. And all the votes are counted, which means we finally made it to Ontario. Woohoo. There's quite a few ridings in Ontario. The good thing is the NDP has barely any shot in any of them. We have Sault Ste. Marie, Algoma, which is for some reason one of it's safe liberal here, like overly safe liberal, but it's one of the only conservative ridings in Northern Ontario in this map. I'm not sure why. I'm inclined to believe 338 Canada on this one. Um, though there is an incumbent Liberal MP, uh, redistributed results to have the Conservatives winning here. Though I think the NDP falling off could make it somewhat close. I'm going to split the difference and have it as narrowly Conservative. Then we got, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. Um, it's relatively close between all three parties with an NDP riding, but the NDP once again has completely fallen off. It's also close in Polio. I think the Liberals probably win this a little bit over the honestly over the Conservatives probably. Or I'm gonna be cautious and say over the NDP. Um, there. Now we move on to Southern Ontario. We have two NDP seats that could potentially flip Liberal. You have Windsor West. It's very close here. I'd say the NDP incumbent Brian Mass does seem to have some local ties. Owned by Coitabin in 2021. He's definitely vulnerable, but I'd say as of now, he's the slight favorite to win with like 2% of 2% lead or something. London Fanshawe, you have the incumbent NDP MP polling to lose her. I'm not sure. Um, their seat, very NDP seat. But I could see it being kind of close. I do think, as of now, I think the Liberals are narrowly favored to end up flipping it. Then we got a lot of seats here. Woohoo! So we got the Niagara seats and the other Hamilton seat. The Liberals are doing pretty good here, so I think both of them end up likely. We have Hamilton Center, very NDP area that now potentially could go Liberal. I think they fall short here by like 2 to 3 points, though it's definitely a riding that could end up flipping to the Liberals. I don't know why Cambridge is not safe. You see, I'm an idiot who doesn't know Canadian politics that well. That's what people told me when I said conservatives would lose. Now they're down by 5 in the polls. I think back then it was 4. Um, some Kitchener areas probably don't end up being too competitive. I mean, obviously the conservatives were polling to win these areas before Trudeau dropped out, but like, what areas were they not polling to win before Trudeau dropped out? Probably safe. Uh, for Liberals, Kitchener South. I'd say probably likely at the end of the day. That's safe. Kitchener Center, I could see Mike Morris go down potentially. I think this is a bit too much having it Green Party plus 28, especially with the Greens losing some votes. It was, after all, only a Green flip in 2021. I still think they hold it, and I think they hold it with a rather large majority of like 9%. But it could be within the realm of possibility, especially for the Liberals to take down the incumbent Green MP, and it could help us go to total Green death, which is what we want out of this election. We got Niagara on the Lake, pretty close battleground. Um, you have a conservative incumbent running against a liberal. You have seen the NDP fall off here, but this is the type of area that's very working class, which I think the NDP falling off here will actually, I I mean, it's kind of controversial to say this, but I think it'll benefit the conservatives enough that they end up holding it. Niagara South, you have an incumbent Liberal MP. The NDP has also fell off here. Redistributed, it's a conservative seat, and I'm inclined to have it very slightly going conservative here. Then we go to Greater Toronto area. Try to bust out most of these quickly. Um, Mississauga Lakeshore, I'd say, is likely Liberal. You have Oakville East and Milton East. Pretty sure Polywave, yeah, less bullish on conservative chances here. I'm going to say both of them are around likely. Then we got the Brampton area, which could potentially be competitive. It's actually very conservative leaning in the Polywave forecast. I think it's being a bit too bullish on conservatives at this point. I'd say Brampton West is actually safe, but areas like Brampton Center and Brampton South, I actually think 338 has them somewhat close. Brampton area, Brampton South, they have as safe, but Brampton Center is likely. I'm inclined to believe both of those. And now you realize what I realized a little bit ago. If you're watching the screen, um, there is the slightest misalignment with where my mouse clicks, and which seat border is where. So like here, that's a seat border here. It's very hard to show, but like there, I click here, and that's Toronto St. Paul, which is a safe liberal flip. There's a conservative MP there running for re-election. He's going to lose quite easily. Oh 07, he tried his best. It could be kind of close. He is uh relatively well suited to represent that seat, but like at the end of the day, it's a safe liberal seat. They're going to flip it back. Brampton East is actually going conservative in Polywave forecast. I'm not sure. You really can't make the same argument you make for Surrey, which is conservatives overformed on the provincial level. I still think it probably ends up safe at the end of the day. Um, Brampton, or they're all Brampton seats. But these are kind of close in the 338 map. Um, it's still it's going to be a hard win for the Conservatives in either one. Put you as safe, put you as maybe put that one as lean. Um, yeah, I'll put what is that? Brampton, Ching, Shingua Cozy Park. I'll put that as a, lean seat. Now move on to Central Toronto, York Center. Conservatives have invested a lot into York. It seems like it hasn't paid off whatsoever. Lean liberal. Valgon Woodbridge. I think this. Not sure. Yeah, this has a liberal incumbent. Um, it's close. It's a very marginal seat. Um, but I think at the end of the day, probably ends up leaning against the Conservatives. King Valgan. Probably a hard win for the Liberals here. Um, if I'm not mistaken, the Conservative MP Anna Roberts is relatively strong. I'd say it's a likely seat for her. You have Newmarket, Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill. Um, Newmarket is safe on this forecast, but is relatively close in 2021. I'm inclined to believe that it'll at least be under 10. Um, we have Aurora, Oak Ridges. This has an LPC incumbent. Once again, a pretty marginal seat with a low NDP vote share. That voted conservative in 2019. I still don't think they're the favorites for it, and I think it leans against them, but by like 1 to 2 points. Then we got Richmond Hill South, which I think is safe. No, different one. But it's close on both of these forecasts. Uh, it was kind of close way back when, but I don't think it's close enough to end up flipping. This is what I was thinking about. Markham Union Valley conservative plus 36. I don't know if I agree with that. The Liberals did have a pretty terrible MP here who Mark Carney endorsed, but eventually pulled out. He said his conservative opponent should be dragged to Singapore and handed over to the CCP, or maybe it wasn't Singapore. I don't know. He said some country city in Asia and handed over to the government or CCP. I don't know why, but he dropped out for that. It's a relatively marginal seat. I do think you'll have a scandal bonus for the conservatives, um, which will make it close, but I don't think enough to have the conservatives end up winning it. Markham Stouffville, uh, eh, is it going to be close? I'm not sure about that. Liberals did win it by. I think I'll say it ends up safe for the Liberal Party. Then we move on to here. It's Bowman, Oshawa. I don't know. I'm losing my mind. Just wish it was like Ontario's 53rd district. But they decided to be creative and make it fun. This is a conservative district, but it does have a large NDP vote share. I think at the end of the day, it probably ends up likely, but it definitely could end up flipping. We have these two seats: Barrie, Springwater, Oral, Medonte, and Simcoe North. I think these ones might have had a large NDP vote share. No, I'm not sure about it. Yeah, it had a modest NDP vote share. I'm going to say that one's safe, though. I didn't look into all these ridings beforehand. Sorry. Um, but it was more of a guide rather than a this seat is safe, then we'll do all the rest of them. But this one's projected to be narrowly under 10. I agree with that because there's a large enough NDP vote share. Um, Probably like a 6 to 7 point margin. Then we move on to here, Peterborough, Bay of Quinte, probably like Quinte, like some retarded way to say it. People are gonna be like, "Oh, Testa, you didn't know the stupid fucking dumbass way to say random riding in Canada. You must not be a true Canadian." Whoa, this one. Remember, this one used to be safe conservative. Actually, it wasn't safe conservative. The NDP nearly won it. Well, they're at 11% now. I don't know why it's so close on Pulley Wave, or actually, it's not even that close on Pulley Wave. I don't know why I had it as toss up. Um, But we have 1, 2, which are kind of potentially competitive. Probably not. They could be. Um, Not even that large of an NDP vote share. I'd say likely. Let me just check that this one didn't have like 20% NDP. Yeah, I think both of them are under 10, but they're not going to have too large of an NDP vote share. Peterborough is actually flipping against the Conservatives in this forecast. It was a very narrow Conservative win, and the NDP did get a large percent here. Though I am inclined to believe that more NDP votes to go to the CPC. Like, the polling isn't like 100% of the NDP votes go to the Liberals, and the Conservatives are flipping a few votes away from the Liberals, plus you have an incumbent MP. Um, so I'm going to say it narrowly stays Conservative, though here in Bay of Kinty, or whatever the fuck you pronounce it as, um, similar. I'm going to have it narrowly flipping to Liberals, which means now they are 3 seats off a majority. And also, a while ago, mathematically it became impossible for the Conservatives to get a majority or a minority. Rest in peace. But we have Carlton and Nepean. Figured I point them out. Polier's riding, Carney's riding. Both are considered pretty safe for the respective leaders. Carlton would actually be the one that could potentially be competitive, but once again, it's a leader seat. Probably shouldn't be that competitive. I don't even know why it's this competitive here. Maybe there's like a riding bowl. There's like Bollier will lose by 12. Like no, these are not going to be that close. Um, Either one flips, I'd be shocked. Now, only 40 seats left. Most of them are Quebec, which drives me insane. I hate Quebec politics. I don't know. I don't think the bloc will keep its like 32 or something seats because the major theme of this election has been Canadian nationalism. Um, and like uniting Canada against threats like the U.S. and the bloc really doesn't like their message doesn't strike well. Of like we are a Quebec interest party. Canada will screw you over. We must fight for Quebec. Like that really doesn't resonate well um, with the average voter in Canada. So I think that they suffer for that. Um, you probably still do have a few of these seats end up likely for the bloc. One over the Conservatives. Two over the Liberals. Three over the Liberals. Four over the Liberals. Trying to bust out a few of these. Montcalm, I think that's close on. No, that would be a safe seat. My bad. Quebec, I just gave up filling out the seats beforehand. It's very hard. We're gonna put that as safe Liberal. 2 seats away. Um, Saint John, Jean, whatever it is. Block plus 16 here. Block plus 4 here. I'm gonna split the difference and say it's likely. Um, I think they're being slightly underestimated here, but here they're being pretty overestimated. Here it probably ends up likely. Um, then the seat everyone probably wants to talk about, Berthier Muskegee. You have a former NDP MP from the NDP wave in Quebec of 2011 running again. She's been considered. She has a chance at winning. It's been close before, though that has been with her running. I think the block's going down, but also the NDP is collapsing. I think it balances out, and it probably ends up likely um, for the block at the end of the day. And we're actually running out of ridings. Woohoo! Shifford probably a bit too optimistic on the block's chances there. And I'll say lean liberal. Um, and you got Repentigny. I don't know why I'm being screamed at to repent for my sins. Now I'll make a Canadian election prediction. I guess that's what my viewer base would want, since I said that Polyev would not win. Look who's laughing now. By the way, people are like, he must be some liberal. Like, look at my fucking profile picture. Oh my god, I support Polyev. Does that make you happy now? Now subscribe because of that. Um, but yeah, the remaining seats are going to be kind of close. I don't even think, yeah, not even Wave, which is kind of bullish on the block, has these 2 seats. Um, I mean, the block. So 1-2. The Liberals now have a majority. Wow, this is a shocking revelation. Will Conservatives outrun the number of MPs that they have right now? Stay tuned. Um, we also have Terabon, narrowly block there, a bit more block here. I still think the block narrowly holds on there. I don't think the block's going to surge too much, especially after the French debate, where Carney did relatively well. I think the block's not having the best time here. I think the block probably ends up holding on. Um, though, with the reduced majority, the reason I looked at it is because it's actually the only seat they have in Montreal, besides for Le Verdun. The guys, they won a by-election here. Wow. Wow, boy, am I surprised. Yeah, it was impressive for the Bloc Québécois to win a bye in such a liberal seat, but the liberals are at a majority there. It's over. But Le Point de Ile, I don't speak French, could potentially be competitive. It does seem like the Bloc is favored there. Although I do think liberals will go up in the city of Montreal enough to knock it below a likely margin. I'm not even gonna try to fucking pronounce that one. Barely liberal, more liberal. Let me see how it was before it as a block incumbent. Very narrow block seat. I think it probably ends up flipping liberal, but by a reduced margin from what they say. I don't think the block will do as bad as some people think. Here, since there's a block incumbent, whoa, common theme. Yeah, this is a 10-point majority. You're not going to be able to erase that. Lean block, or you probably won't be able to really. I exaggerate. It's like when real Americans said, "Oh yeah, Sean Cassidy, he's done." Like he meant that he's not favored. Exaggerating is what you do. Here, block +4. I mean, once again, it's a 10-point majority. Um, it's gonna be a hard win no matter what. So I think the block ends up holding there. Then we have a few more seats in Quebec. Actually, here's our first one over here. And for all my conservative fans, this is a potential conservative win. Woo! Yeah! I was very close in 2021, a three-way split. Um, the block has gone down and the liberals have benefited from that, but I think conservatives are definitely within the running to get it. I think it's tilting liberal as of now, but it could end up going conservative. Wow. Um, LeBron scores a three-pointer, cut the lead down to 143. And I say LeBron because I don't even know who's running in here. Oh, you have a block incumbent. Yves Blanchett. They have LeBron. Their LeBron is Yves. I don't know. Losing my mind. I don't even remember who the original guy who scored the shot is for the meme is. I'm losing my mind. Too many writings. Too many writings. Oh God, I see Atlantic Canada. I'm like, oh, fun takes there. This big rule seat is close. Um, I mean, the block won once again with a majority there. I think they'll probably end up holding on to it. It's also going block in Polly Wave in case anyone cares. Alac Saint Jean. Oh, thank you for the dumb name. Um, is going block +10 there. The Conservatives are doing okay in Quebec. I just don't think okay enough to win a seat like that. Not going to try to pronounce that. Is going conservative here, but it's also going block here. Um, it really wasn't close before. I think the Liberals will take some, but they won't be able to make it too close. Though I'll put it as lean instead of likely. We have Montmorency, Charlevoix. Caroline Desbian's running for re-election. Hope she wins because she endorsed Marie Le Pen. Um, though I do think at the end of the day, it's narrow, but I do think the conservatives end up flipping that. Well, I could make an entire video clickbaiting based on conservatives flipping one riding. Beauport, um, Oilo, I don't know how to pronounce that. Block riding, but conservatives were narrow behind. I think they'll flip it narrowly, but still, once again, it's a flip because the block will go down. And then we have one final riding here. Not gonna try to pronounce that yet again. But it was a pretty big block majority. I think they'll probably win it with the majority. This time around, Rimouski Law, whatever the hell. Yeah, the block probably isn't gonna face too much opposition there. So the block are at 25, or we have to go through this one. I mean, there's a liberal incumbent here. It's going to be hard to dislodge him. Even in a more block friendly seat, I think he wins by like 3 to 4%. Now we get to Atlantic, Canada. Oh boy, this one's going to be a pain in the ass. Um, so you do have some safe conservative seats here. These ones were kind of in jeopardy for a little bit of the campaign, but they've gone back to conservatively. Like that's kind of insane that a safe conservative riding was that close. Um, but you do have a few competitive ridings here. Most of them either having a conservative incumbent or a good conservative candidate. This one, I think, uh, it's a conservative seat, if I'm not mistaken. Um, with the conservative incumbent not running for re-election. I do think that Liberals' numbers in Atlanta, Canada are inflated, so I think that they underperform here. This seat goes conservative by like 2 to 3. Yeah, I think that's what actually Holy Wave has it going Liberal, but I do think that like Carney's support is just uh, pretty unreasonably high in the polls in Atlanta, Canada, so I'm willing to bet on the side of like a no, a little bit less than that. This one I think has a conservative incumbent running for re-election. I mean, he won overwhelmingly. He's going to win again. Probably. Disclaimer: if he doesn't win again, don't blame me. I I can't predict every single riding right. Just like you don't you wouldn't expect someone to predict every house seat right. It's the exact same thing here, except there's 5 parties that can compete for every fucking riding, and you win it with a 30% plurality. Um, but Cumberland, Colchester, safe conservative in this forecast. Also voted and it voted conservative plus 12. I think it narrows a little bit, but I still think it's likely. Then you have here South Shore, St. Margaret's. You have a cockroach of a conservative here. Rick Perkins knows what to say. Would have won by quite a bit in 2021. I think his margin of victory goes down a little bit, lean, but I still think he wins by like 4 to 5. Cape Renton, Kansas. I'm not gonna even try to pronounce that. This is a liberal incumbent, if I'm not mistaken, who opted against re-election. Conservatives have a good candidate here. I don't think it'll be enough to make it particularly close. Likely liberal. Same thing with Central Prince Edward Island. This one could be close. There's likely before. I think it stays as likely liberal. Then we have uh Newfoundland, Central Newfoundland. You have a conservative incumbent here. It's going to be hard for liberals to dislodge him. Uh, Especially since I'm pretty sure he's now an incumbent and used to not be an incumbent. I think he wins by 2 to 3, though it definitely could end up going liberal. We'll know fast. This is the first area to report on election night. So, like, if conservatives are winning 2 seats in Prince Edward Island, well, the polls were off. But like, if they're losing Central Newfoundland, like, it's over for them. Long Range Mountains, I suppose they have a good candidate here. Um, and it's a narrowish seat, but I still think liberals end up winning it. Uh, Though, yeah, the pulley wave is actually more bullish on liberals here. Turnover the peninsulas is narrowly under 10 on that forecast, but it is a liberal plus 12 margin here. I'd say conservatives, I think, have a good candidate there, so it ends up likely. So liberals are 8 seats above a majority, 180. I told you it wouldn't be 188 or 180. Yeah, 188. I definitely, I think it's around the middle ground between the two forecasts. And the selection is close enough that I could definitely see liberals not getting a majority. It does depend on how they do in Quebec. If they do worse than expected in Quebec, not going to be a fun time. And Toronto, especially Brampton. If polio is anywhere close to accurate as to conservatives winning some of these Brampton seats, liberals are not getting a majority. Same thing with Surrey. He even brought this up himself. And if the liberal surge in areas like Alberta is not concentrated in the cities, and like they do end up getting a good performance in where's the map? I just want a map. Does anyone have a map? Um but like if they get 20% in Medicine Hat, Cardston, Warner, whoa, wow, you only lost that by 50. Those votes will come from Edmonton. Like they can reach 30% province wide while winning like maybe 2 seats in Edmonton. Um, so I'd say the areas to watch on election night. Obviously, Atlantic, Canada will come in first. We'll have full results from there first. That's important. I leave in me coughing in the videos. If you don't like to hear me cough, um, comment down below. Tester stop being deathly ill and make less shitty content. You also will see Quebec is important. I think these outskirts in Montreal, like where liberals are winning seats outside Montreal, will be important. If they end up losing those seats, could be a bad night for them. Brampton, but also uh, what the hell is it called? Yorktown, I think. Yorkville. York Center. Yeah. This York area, Richmond Hill, Markham Unionville, Aurora, uh, Woodbridge, York Center. That's also going to be pretty important for whether liberals get a majority or not. Uh, I'd say to some extent, Niagara, if I'm wrong about this and liberals do form there, could get interesting. Same thing with like uh, central Ontario. Um, and if they can pick off a few more seats in Saskatchewan, it's bad. But I'd say it's dumb. Because it's the last area to close and or poll close on election night, and the joke is you'll call the election before you even get votes from this place. But I think the election comes down to British Columbia. Um, you have a crossroads here of all three parties that have any nationwide appeal. You have the Conservatives on the outskirts. If they're able to win some of these more competitive seats on the outskirts of Vancouver, like Langley Township, Cloverdale, Langley City, Pitt Meadows, even Surrey Center, Delta, Richmond Center, Richmond East. Like they're in a rather good position to deny liberals a majority, or even if they pull off the upset, perhaps get a minority themselves. And if you see the NDP outperform within the city limits, like one, two, three seats that they're favored to win, they win. Um, I guess our good friend Jogmeat holds his seat. Um, then you could potentially see liberals slip below the majority threshold. But I'd say liberals are favored to gain a majority as of now. It does appear Pierre has blundered, and like for those of you, I get if you're Canadian, even if you're Canadian, you could listen to this, but especially those of you who are not Canadian, are like, oh my god, this guy is delusional. Oh, he just hates conservatism. Like this is the most bland milk toast form of conservatives. In like the Western Hemisphere. Like the only thing conservative about them is that they have conservative in the name. Like it's like being like, oh, I love the CDU. I find so much personality in the CDU. I mean, there's no AFD in Canada. Like the PPC is a joke and going to get like 1 to 2% this election. But like, if you find personality in the conservatives, well, like go to bat to defend them. Like, why? The conservatives are not that. They're not that good of a party. Um, and this is a lesson to conservatives. Like, you have to run a semi, not completely fucking retarded campaign. This has been a terrible campaign. Pierre has not run a campaign. He has repeated some slogans again and again. They let themselves be played so hard. They thought, oh, the liberals will never remove the carbon tax. Guess what? One of the first things Mark Carney did when he became prime minister was, um, and then they spent like a few more weeks attacking him on it after he removed it. But like, this is a pretty terribly run campaign for the conservatives, and like, I know, especially if you watch the streams, you've heard this before. Like, oh, this is the last election the Conservatives can win. One token Canadian has walked that back. I used to say this is the last election Conservatives can possibly win. If they can't win this, then they'll never win another election again. Now he's leaving room for the 2029 election or a snap election before there. And, oh, weird. But he's not confident on what he believes whatsoever. But I think it's a major setback for the Conservatives that they've blundered this. Obviously, this is not my final prediction. We have five, or by the time this video comes out, 4 days left until the election. I will have another prediction out soon. Um, Either the day before the election or the day of the election. So subscribe if you want to see that. Uh, and I will say, uh, there's some reason, like obviously, my head tells me that it will be a liberal majority, but my gut tells me that it'll be a liberal minority. Because you have seen some polls with the conservative surging. Obviously, I made the video on Main Street, got a shit ton of views. Liberals have retaken the lead in Main Street. But even some of these polls, especially today, and yesterday, which doesn't show up on 338 Canada, the Conservatives have begun to do better um, in those polls. Like it, it it's seemingly tightening, and for Liberals to win a majority, they probably want to win the popular vote by 2 to 3%. If they don't end up doing that, which some of these recent polls show, like even Ecos, I find this hilarious, but the recent Ecos poll has it as Liberal +2. Conservatives had the lead in the Ecos Daily Tracker for a little bit. Like, that's insane. It's insane. It's the same pollster had Liberals at like 17-point lead early on. Uh, Genius. But my gut tells me that it will be a liberal minority government. But for now, I have to wait and see. We have to wait and see if the Conservatives will continue to pull off like a mini surge in the polls before Election Day. If they do, and if turnout is like pretty high, which even though it doesn't favor them completely, I still think probably favors them a little bit. It could be closer, and we could start talking about a potential conservative win. This election isn't completely over, and while 56 seats separate the Liberals from the Conservatives, look at this on the bottom. There's quite a few competitive seats that can go either which way. Um, eh, eh, could will most of these end up going Conservative that I have as Liberal? Probably not, but a few of them I could see going NDP or Bloc or even Conservative, which does help the Conservatives get closer to a plurality. Though I think Conservative majority is probably off the table as of now. But anyways, thank you for watching. This is not completely based on the polling. I wasn't just going to copy down the 338 map and be like, "Hey, look, guys, this is my official prediction. I'll get 95% of the seats right, but I'll have no interesting commentary on it. I won't know why the hell I have each race going whichever which way. Um and I'll be like a bot who's not even human, not contributing anything with this video. Like, I'm not going to do that. I try to give my thoughts for these races. And if you think I'm a bumbling idiot, you're right. I'm not Canadian. Sorry if I butchered some stuff. I even might have butchered Poilievre. Uh, Poilov. Pierre Poilev's name. I might have butchered Poilev's name a few times, so my apologies. And if you're Canadian and you're insulting me, for getting this election wrong, we'll see on election night. I'd be happy if the Conservatives won. Um, Even though the Conservative Party is far, far from perfect, it still would show that Canadians are like kind of slightly more conservative, which would be, I guess, a victory. I don't know. Subscribe, like, comment, share. Buy my poll and membership. Woohoo! Subscribe. Oh, and one more thing. Subscribe. Thank you for watching. Godspeed. Testers done. Out.